Right, well, good afternoon, everybody. This is the third lecture I've done for Bannockburn House. It's a great pleasure to be doing this one in particular because it's one of the first ones that I did anywhere. So I have given it several times before. As I usually do, I've customised it a bit for this particular audience. So I hope you'll bear with me. I'm David Brown. I retired last year after 27 years as a public transport officer with the Stirling Council and its predecessor, Central Regional Council. So it's about, this particular lecture is very close to my heart, being about transport in the Stirling Council area. I hope you've not come here expecting to have lots of lovely scenes of the Trossachs, because this is more about the history. But Ross has filled that gap admirably by displaying some beautiful drone scenery, scenery taken from drones, video taken from drones, should I say, earlier on. So apologies if you've missed that, but thank you, Ross. It really does set the scene. So I'll just share the screen and get started. Right, the title of this presentation is The Lure of the Trossachs. And this title comes from the section heading of a part of John Thomas's book, The North British Railway Volume 2, in which he describes how the North British Railway Company and the Caledonian-backed Calendar Roban Railway Company produced rival schemes for penetrating the Trossachs in the 1870s. Now, I'm not going to go into that at all because both schemes came to nothing, but it did emphasise the fact that the Trossachs was, by the 1870s, seen as such a lucrative area for tourism that it was in the railway company's interests to try and penetrate the area, thinking that there was a sufficient market there to be profitable. And here we see this rather idyllic scene, probably from the 1930s, taken at the pier at Loch Katrine. But in the course of this presentation, we're going to be looking at the development of tourism in the area from the 1840s to the 1930s. Now, the coach road up to Loch Katrine was completed around 1780. And after that, a number of people did go up there and were quite captivated by the scenery. So much so that the fame of the area had spread to the knowledge of William Wordsworth, Dorothy Wordsworth, and Samuel Taylor Coleridge, all of whom visited in 1803. Wordsworth was given to believe that the scenery was equal to that of his beloved Lake District, and so was very much attracted to coming here. But it wasn't only the scenery. They were doing a tour of Scotland in the footsteps, not of Sir Walter Scott, who was not to publish until 1810, but of the writings of Ossian, as promoted by James McPherson. Now, the Ossianic cycle of poems in Gaelic was believed to be original poetry from the 6th century or even earlier, that had been maintained by oral tradition until written down by the said James McPherson. Now, ultimately, McPherson was proved to be a hoaxer. In fact, McPherson had written the poetry himself. He'd written it first in English, and then when he was asked to produce Gaelic originals, then had to back translate it into Gaelic. But for a long time, it was believed to be genuine. It gave rise to a lot of interest right across Europe, not just simply in Scotland, but right across Europe. It inspired quite a number of continental European artists and, of course, people like the Wordsworths in Britain. Now, McPherson died in 1796. He'd become an MP in the meantime. He'd become quite wealthy, and he was buried in Westminster Abbey. So he didn't do badly out of it. By 1803, people were beginning to suspect that maybe this wasn't everything McPherson had cracked it up to be. But what it did do was tune in with developing European romanticism, of European romanticism, with its emphasis on the noble savage and the romantic landscape. And McPherson's writings had epitomised that view to such an extent that he amassed a considerable literary following right across Europe. And the man who really benefited from that groundwork was Sir Walter Scott. Now, in 1810, he published his long poem, The Lady of the Lake, the sort of poem that readers nowadays would not really have the patience to read, which is unfortunate. But this told the stirring tales of gallant and daring actions in and around the Trossachs, the gathering, the chase, and the romantic figure of James V in disguise, and James Fitzjames, and things like that. And the fact that The Lady of the Lake used real locations meant that here were places that you could actually come and visit. You could come round with your copy of The Lady of the Lake and go around, this is where this happened, that's where that happened. Very, very exciting. And 2 years after the publication of The Lady of the Lake, the Anglo-Irish novelist Maria Edgeworth wrote in a letter to Scott, "The year before your Lady of the Lake was published, the average number of carriages which passed the road near Loch Katrine was from 50 to 60. The year afterwards, 270 carriages brought people of taste to the ground." People of taste, you will notice. This was wealthy people coming round, wanting to see something of wild Scotland, particularly as this was in the period of the Napoleonic Wars, where many of the European resorts were closed to British tourists. So here was a wild landscape that you could come and enjoy right on your own doorstep without any fear of finding yourself in the middle of a real battle. And Walter Scott, of course, returned to the Trossachs in 1818 for his novel Rob Roy. A number of other celebrities followed, and in 1829, this little sketch of Loch Katrine was made by Felix Mendelssohn. On his tour of Scotland, the most famous part, of course, was Fingal's Cave and what came out of that. But the next step in creating a tourist market really came from the pioneering English photographer, Henry Fox Talbot. Now, Fox Talbot came on a tour of Scotland in 1844, and out of that published 23 photographs of what he considered to be his best Scottish views, several of which came from the Trossachs. Now, to modernise, a number of these sepia photographs don't look particularly inspiring. The technology of the film technology of the day, it was very, very primitive. It was really in the early days of photography. You had to have exactly the right conditions. You had to control the exposure. There was all sorts of things that made landscape photography in particular difficult. But what it meant was that these scenes were genuine. Very much the idea was that this was the age before camera tricks and the Photoshop and manipulation of photographs. And of course, a fine, upstanding man like Henry Fox Talbot would not get involved in any jiggery-pokery. So these were seen as genuine views, and these excited people as well, because you could see exactly what you were coming to see. This sort of scene may have been kind of uninspiring to us, but to someone who is an industrialist in a Lancashire mill town, perhaps this would be a nice place to bring your family. The entrepreneur who really latched onto this was Thomas Cook. Thomas Cook in 1846, 2 years after the publication of Fox Talbot's book, which I should say retailed for a guinea, £1 and 1 shilling, which at that time would have been at least a month's wage for a ploughman. So bought by middle class people, the market, exactly the market that Thomas Cook appealed to. Cook started his Cook's Tartan tours in 1846, 2 years after Fox Talbot's book, before the construction of a cross-border railway, which didn't come to 1848. So Cook's party, pioneering party of no less than 350 tourists, had a steamer journey from Fleetwood to Ardrossan as part of their journey, and were then conducted round the Scotland and the Highlands by Cook. The Loch Katrine and the Trossachs and Loch Lomond forming a major part of the itinerary. And around the same time, guidebooks began to be developed. that people in England and elsewhere would buy, that would tell them about all these exciting places they could come and see in Scotland. Photography, very expensive, so they didn't normally have photographic plates inside. Instead, you had these drawings, which is sought to be as realistic as they could. Very, very evocative of this romantic landscape that you were coming to see. In Scotland, one of the main publishers of guidebooks were Adam and Charles Black in the North Bridge in Edinburgh. And as you can see there, Black's Picturesque Tourist of Scotland, an All Scotland guidebook, was by 1859 in its 14th edition. So you can see just how popular this was, constantly updated. And these books not only described the landscape, but they told you how to relate to it. This really very romantic landscape. This sort of thing in this painting by the Scottish artist John Knox, undated but reckoned to be between 1815 and 1820. You can see in the bottom left-hand corner a group of fashionable Regency-dressed tourists, accompanied by their own piper, enjoying the scenery, which in the background, I have to say, looks suspiciously like the Matterhorn. Very alpine looking background. The photography was maybe a little more prosaic, of exactly the same location, but now there was by this time in the 1850s, there was a steamer. This is the paddle steamer Rob Roy, which would take you on your journey, across Loch Katrine, and you could even complete a round trip by going between Stranaglachar and Inversnaid and carrying on down Loch Lomond on the Loch Lomond steamer to Ballach. Rob Roy was actually the third vessel plying the tourist trade in Loch Katrine. The first one was the paddle steamer Gypsy, which sank in mysterious circumstances, succeeded by an 8-oared galley called the Water Witch, and then by the steamer Rob Roy. Of course, you had to get to Trossachs Pier. The Trossachs, I should say, the name initially just meant the pass of the Trossachs, which led up to Loch Katrine, but the people marketing it for the tourist trade used it to apply to the whole area, and that name has stuck since. But of course, if you were wanting to sail on that nice steamer from Loch Katrine, you had to get there. And the way to get there was by coach. And here in 1847, we can see Mrs. Stewart of the Trossachs Inn and Mr. McGregor of the Dreadnought Hotel advertising their commodious carriage, taking people up to Loch Katrine, and you'll see that they make particular mention of the connections that are available with the steamers, both on Loch Katrine and on Loch Lomond, and how you can arrive in Glasgow the same day. Fare from Calendars to the Trossachs, 2 and 6pence, reasonable amount of money. And note that Mrs. Stewart and A. McGregor beg also to state that their conveyance is the only one on the road in connection with the steamers on the lakes. Now, this is not a mistake. This is not something inserted by an English typesetter. These people know where their market is, and their market lies largely in England. With tourists coming up from England, they want to see the lakes, and Mrs. Stewart and Mr. McGregor are assuring them that that is indeed what they will see. But in 1848 arrives the Scottish Central Railway, and I'm not going to say much about this because you've heard me, if you've seen my last 2 lectures, you'll have heard me speaking plenty about the Scottish Central Railway. But anyway, the Scottish Central Railway arrived in March 1848. Now, that was a very auspicious year to arrive in Stirling, because it was also the year in which Victoria and Albert leased Balmoral for the first time, which of course they subsequently purchased, making Highland holidays highly fashionable with the royal seal of approval. That was one thing. Secondly, 1848 was the year of revolutions. Revolutions were breaking out all over Europe. And if you were sitting comfortably down in England, looking across to this sea of revolution in Europe, continental Europe maybe wasn't the best of places to be going this year. So, hey, Scotland, and now you can get there by train from London. So, the answer's obvious. Come to Scotland. And having arrived in Stirling, you will have this wonderful conveyance taking you to Callander to connect with the coaches. And you can see here that the Royal Archibald Campbell of the Royal Hotel is advertising that he connects directly with the Stirling station of the Scottish Central Railway. Will take you straight to Loch Katrine, and his commodious coach, or a coach similar to his, is shown on the right-hand side there, directly outside the Dreadnought Hotel. The area continued to attract celebrity visitors, such as John Ruskin and John Everett Millay, who arrived along with Ruskin's wife, Euphemia, or Effie, in 1853. Now, Ruskin had previously been in the area in 1838 with his parents, and Effie, his wife, had been born in Perth and knew the area pretty well. A lot came out of this trip, much more than simply this portrait of Ruskin in Glenartney, made by Millay. There was a whole, Ruskin's marriage was annulled. Effie subsequently married Millay. Big story there. If you want to see it, go on the internet. I'm not going to tell you just now. I'm just going to say that the most significant thing that Millay did for us in terms of this talk was to draw this little sketch from that holiday, showing how wealthy tourists of the time may well spend their time on a fishing trip. And here we see some very well-dressed people out there fishing on the loch with some local boatmen conveying them. And just in case you thought you might be roughing it going out there into these wild highlands, the hoteliers are advertising their accommodation in the most reassuring terms. Just look at the reassuring language of Duncan Campbell of the Golden Lion Hotel in Stirling in this advert. He respectfully intimates that many improvements have recently been effected in the interior arrangement and management of the house, rendering it complete in every department as a temporary residence for families, tourists, and the public generally. And just in case you still think you might be roughing it, right down at the bottom, the last reassuring message: hot, cold, and shower baths. Also, if you're going to Loch Katrine and the Trossachs, as all good tourists should, the coaching department will convey you there, as well as to Kenmore, Aberfeldy, Dunkeld, Loch Ernhead, and lots of other wonderful places. And Hayes, right in the immediate vicinity of the Stirling station of the Scottish Central Railway, as well as the post office and the banks. So you're not going to be roughing it at the Golden Lion. Neither are you going to be roughing it at the Dreadnought Hotel in Callander, where Archibald Mingus will extol the virtues of his hotel in equally reassuring language. But if you were ever out in a Mediterranean island in the 1990s or thereabouts and you were hassled by timeshare touts, you will immediately empathise with this paragraph in Mingus's advert where he says, "From the annoyance to which strangers are subjected by the system of canvassing in favour of an old monopoly hotel by hired agents, Mr. Mingus thinks it due to the public respectfully to state that he has never resorted to means of relying more on the attractions, comforts and conveniences offered in his hotel than to a system of canvassing which is so generally condemned by the public and has long formed a perpetual annoyance to tourists travelling from Loch Lomond to Loch Katrine." So come to Loch Lomond and Loch Katrine, you're not only going to see all this lovely scenery, you're going to get hassled by hotel touts. But that goes to say, if the hotel think it worthwhile to send out touts to solicit for business, there must be a fair amount of business out there to solicit for. So that in itself in 1855 testifies to the growing attraction of the Trossachs. And here we have a few years later in 1866 from one of Murray's guides, Scotland Described, adverts for several different hotels in the area: Rowerdennan Hotel, Foot of Ben Lomond, Andrew Blair. The Trossachs, Ardchin and Rochan Hotel, A. Blair, proprietor. Loch Lomond, Inversnaid Hotel, Andrew Blair begs to inform tourists, etc. What this is illustrating is hotel chains starting to build up. And in this area, none more successful than that started by Mr. Andrew Blair, as we shall see. And we have coordination with the railway at Callander. The Caledonian by this time met the Callander-Noban Railway at Callander, but as the Caledonian operated the Callander-Noban, the trains operated straight through from Glasgow Buchanan Street to Oban from 1880. And we can see a lovely array of coaches here all ready to leave with a goodly a number of passengers. All of these coaches in the picture are the property of Mr. Andrew Blair, who had negotiated exclusive rights of access to Callander railway station, paying the railway company rather, a hefty sum for that privilege, but the number of passengers on offer no doubt made that worthwhile. And in 1882, the North British Railway, through the company they subsequently bought over, the Strathendrick and Aberfoyle, arrived in Aberfoyle. So we have the Caledonian backed, well, we have the Caledonian in Callander, and we have effectively the North British in Aberfoyle. That's the nearest they get to the Trossachs, but hey, it's near enough. So both Scotland's major lowland railway companies are battling for that tourist traffic going to and from the Trossachs. The North British felt it so worthwhile that they invested in what became known as the Duke's Road. And this was the road from Aberfoyle over the Duke's Pass to Trossachs Pier. It was jointly funded by the Duke of Montrose, the North British Railway Company, and the proprietor of the Aberfoyle quarries. But it became known as the Duke's Road. It remained privately owned until it was taken over by Perth County Council in 1931. And coaches then operated. This is an advert that's telling you about a coach service leaving to Inversnaid, connecting with the Loch Lomond steamers to Ballach, and there were also coaches plying from Aberfoyle up the Duke's Pass to Trossachs Pier. And on the right hand side we can see an advert from the Stirling Observer highlighting the railway times and the coach times, enabling you to get to and from the Trossachs in that direction. Sailing on Loch Katrine for many years was entrusted to the SS Rob Roy, but as the market grew, it outgrew Rob Roy's capacity. So it was replaced in 1900 by our beloved Sir Walter Scott, who is with us to this day. Now converted to allow wheelchair access and the like, very much a modernised vessel, but still looking like she did in 1900. A beautiful ship she is too, brought up in parts and assembled at the Loch. The railway companies from around this time began to promote the links to Aberfoyle more readily to working class people. And we can see here from the 18th and 19th July 1904, that would be Glasgow Fair in 1904, the North British Railway are advertising a £2 day return from Glasgow to Aberfoyle, leaving at 9:30 in the morning and arriving back at, leaving Aberfoyle at 6:55, 5 to 7 in the evening, from a whole array of North British suburban stations across Glasgow. Very much opening up the market. And this is really the market being opened up for the first time to working people. And this is ideal for the Doon the Water market that doesn't like sailing. You can come up to Aberfoyle, and if you're going to do any sailing, it's going to be on a nice placid inland loch rather than in the waves of the Firth of Clyde. Businesses in Aberfoyle may have welcomed this as entire trainloads of customers all coming in to spend their money. But you do wonder if the residents of Aberfoyle looked at this askance, fearing mobs of drunken Glaswegian tourists rampaging through their poor innocent village. But I've had a look through the papers of the time and I can't find any reports of riots or damage of any kind in Aberfoyle, so I assume it all ended happily. But the cheaper end of the market, the low price end of the market expanded greatly in 1908 with the availability of the motor charabanc. The charabanc meant that you could pack a reasonable number of people in. They were cheap to operate. Fuel was quite cheap. The vehicles were still relatively expensive, but the level of demand was such that you collected quite a lot of fares in the course of a day. It wasn't like keeping horses. The vehicle was out earning its money all the time, and when it wasn't working through the winter, then it wasn't costing you a great deal. So firms like Henderson Brothers and Barrington Street could afford to offer this type of service, and you can see they're offering a nice array of attractive destinations. And there's a hood that they can pull over in the event of inclement weather. But at the higher end of the market, the horse-drawn carriage carried on. And here we can see 1909, 1910, Trossachs, the Trossachs Hotel, still quite wealthy looking tourists coming to stay in very comfortable accommodation. This isn't your working class day tripper, this is your affluent tourists coming to stay in the luxurious accommodation of the Trossachs Hotel and go travel around at a leisurely pace in one of the hotel's own coaches. Then, of course, came World War I, and tourism basically came to a standstill. Come the end of the war, there were lots of people who wanted to forget the horrors of the war, get out there in the country again, get out there and enjoy themselves. But something else came with the end of the war. The British forces in the course of the war became the most mechanised in the world. And the result was that at the end of the war in 1918, there was a vast quantity of surplus military vehicles available for sale, like this one. This was an ex-RAF vehicle. It was bought by Walter Alexander, who was a cycle dealer in Camelon and Falkirk. He'd previously been a fitter in a Camelon foundry. And he ran this as part of his business. It was a demountable body, so the chassis worked as a lorry, it had a lorry body put on it during the week, and the charabanc body put on it for the weekend. So it was earning money 7 days a week, packed at the weekends with people in the summer anyway, wanting to get out there and enjoy the summer. And just look how many fare-paying passengers Walter Alexander can pack into the charabanc. Obviously a very lucrative trade to be involved in. And in that environment, the horses had to retire. And we can see this report from the 19th of March, 1923, about a sale which took place, an auction sale that is, that took place on the 11th of March that year, when the Trossachs Hotel Company were selling off all their horse-drawn equipment. And it tells you there that there was a large turnout, but prices were not high. The Inversnaid Hotel Company being one of the principal buyers, because they were still operating horse-drawn vehicles. £5 was the top price paid, realised for the coaches. A one-house wagonette made £4, etc. So not a great demand now for this horse equipment. It doesn't mention anything about horses themselves, so they may have been sold off separately. But that was certainly the end of the road for the coaches. Because the Trossachs now belong to the charabanc. Wonderful array, full of fare-paying passengers here outside Callander railway station. All of these charabancs have one thing in common: they are the property of the company established by none other than Andrew Blair, still exercising exclusive rights of access to Callander railway station. Meanwhile, Alexander is expanding. He's started by 1924. He's opened new premises in the West Bridge Street in the centre of Falkirk. He's got a booking office there now. He's been buying new vehicles. Note, all our coaches are brand new machines fitted with giant pneumatic tyres. Nice, comfortable, smooth ride with these pneumatic tyres. He'll take private parties, public tours. He's going to all these great places for really very good value fares. And the expansion of his company can really be seen here. In the 4 years from 1925 to 1929, on the left-hand side, we have a fairly basic looking pamphlet. There's a charabanc at the top there. It's a list of tours for the 1925 season. He's operating out of Camelin. And by 1929, he's got this beautiful looking brand new coach, no doubt with luxury upholstery, going through all this lovely scenery. Motor coach tours through Bonnie, Scotland by Alexander's Royal Blue Saloon coaches, with offices and agents in Glasgow, Falkirk, London, Stirling, Dundee and Aberdeen. It just illustrates tremendous growth in the space of 4 years. And that wasn't just Alexander's. Here we've got Black's of Callendar in 1925, again with a charabanc, offering tours to the Trossachs, Aberfoyle, Killin, and by 1930 he's got at least 2 fully enclosed coaches ready to take you away still to all these wonderful places. And Black was only one of a number of operators at this time. There was John Walk and David Mitchell and Callendar. There was Aberfoyle Motor Services, Inversnate Hotel, the Trossachs Hotel Company had got their own motor vehicles by this time. Rankin Brothers in Balfron, David Lawson of Kirkintilloch, quite a number of tour operators at that time. And this is day trips. This is people coming out for day trips from Glasgow, from Stirling, and wherever. Bus services start up. This is Campbell's of Aberfoyle, coach on the right hand side, and you can see the timetables of competing companies, Campbell's, Mackenzie's, Hayes. Obviously a very lucrative time. Money was tight in the 1920s, so a coach tour, a trip and a bus trip, good value ways of getting out there and enjoying the countryside. Not the luxury market, but the market that people will come and from all walks of life and enjoy. And of course, that is the final end of coaching in the traditional horse-drawn sense, with a further sale in Aberfoyle in April 1931 at the Bailey Nicol Jarvie Hotel. And the top price on this occasion was £52 for a horse and £7 10 shillings for a carriage. And at this same time, Perth County Council took the Duke's Road into public ownership, and they upgraded it so as to be able to take motor vehicles, the work being completed in 1932. A good time to do it, because by this time the motor coach reigns supreme. I mean, just have a look at this at Trossachs Pier. Coaches from all over, great assembly of drivers standing there. The passengers are probably away on the steamer at this point. The motor coach reigns, but more change is coming. From the 1930s onwards, and especially after World War II, we're going to see the growth of car-based tourism, which is a whole new ball game, and it's such a big and whole new ball game. There is no time to deal with that today. So it's in the 1930s that I leave you, but just think of the contrasts that you have seen in tourism in the Trossachs within the space of 100 years. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I'll be pleased to take any questions.
Well, thank you, David. Thank you very much. I am going to select us to ask everybody in to unmute. If you would like to give David a round of applause for a fantastic lecture there. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks very much.
Excellent. So we'll take it over to the Q&A session part of it. If I can ask everybody to unmute yourself, and if you do have a question, please just speak up or raise your hand. I had a wee question. We'll look for one there, David. The thing about the Lady of the Lake, it really struck me how modern story that is, of the whole outlander effect that has had on Scottish tourism. It's very much all these places are mentioned and everybody's wanting to go and see them. Was that something that was intentional back then? Was that just a happy accident?
I think it was intentional on Scott's part. First of all, Scott was a lawyer, so he was very keen on things being accurate. He did a lot of research for his books, and he wanted them to accurately reflect the places he was writing about. Also, it was a good time to be writing about places because of this whole idea of the literature of what in more modern terms we would call the literature of place, but at that time was called the romantic landscape. And this became a main cultural feature of literature right across Europe. And the fact, I think for Scott, he didn't want to be writing about a fantasy world. He wanted to be writing about a romantic and daring acts taking place in a backdrop that he could see himself, he could appreciate himself, he could go there, he could understand it, and he could then project that into his writing. Writing that sadly has not aged well. But I would entirely agree with you that Outlander is very much a continuation of the Scott tradition in modern language and in modern media. You know, rather than the fantasy landscape of the Lord of the Rings and Game of Thrones has its place as well. But and it's done wonders for tourism in Northern Ireland and the South Island of New Zealand.
Yep.
But I don't think it was one that. But I think at that time Scott was interested in realism, and it was something that his readers appreciated. And I'll tell you, it was something that the hoteliers and stagecoach operators really appreciated.
Yeah, we do love making a bit of money. Thanks for answering that. So we've got Isabel saying thank you very much. She's already missed it. James saying an excellent presentation, David. And we've got Dick King asking if you know the origin of the word Trossachs.
Now, I have read this and I cannot remember. I should have looked that up for today. I should honestly have looked that for today. It refers to the past, the past going towards Lochcatron. It's probably some scrambled Gaelic name. It's probably some Gaelic name that's been scrambled into Lowland Scots and then it threw that into English. It could even be a Brythonic. It could even be a Brythonic name that's made a step from Brythonic into Gaelic into Scots into English. You know, but I just cannot remember. It's so long since I've looked that up.
I've cheekily.
Somebody's come back with the answer.
Yeah.
Somebody's come back with the answer.
Oh yeah. Oh no, I'm missing that one. That one.
It means bristly, stony country.
Absolutely.
Excellent. And thanks to Joyce MacDonald for that. That's brilliant. I just could not remember. Now, there's a question here as well. I was a volunteer on the Ring of Breadalbin minibus. I was involved with the Ring of Breadalbin minibus actually for Stirling Council. Breadalbin basically means the plain of Scotland. Alba, of course, in Gaelic Scotland. It's really the plain of Scotland, as far as I know. And that's why it's Breadalbin and not Breadalbane.
I see. What was your involvement with that project then?
This was a bus service that sought to replicate the success of the Trossachs Trundler by offering, it was a modern bus, but it offered people an opportunity to go around different businesses in the Killin and Aberfeldy area. It effectively circled Loch Tay. It was a great idea. It was a great idea. It didn't really take off entirely to the extent that I think the originators would have liked, but it was quite successful while it lasted. The promotion was very good. I thought the people who were involved with it were absolutely excellent. The businesses involved, they formed this Breadalbin Tourism Cooperative, and they really were pretty go ahead. And I was involved with it. Perth and Kinross Council were involved in supporting it as well. The local authorities scraped together as much of their transport budgets as they could afford to come. Locals could use it as well, but it didn't seem to take off as a facility for locals. And I have to say that the Trossachs Trundler was exactly the same. There was a public perception that it was a tourist service rather than something for And in fact, we used to have people phoning up with the Trossachs terminal. We used to have local people phoning up asking if they could use it. And I think at least on one occasion asking why they couldn't use it, and the answer was, well, you can, and you can even use your concession pass. But anyway, that's by the way. But yes, the Ring of Brid Alban was a great idea, but it didn't. And I see there are some thoughts on it there as well. It did run like a normal bus service, yes.
Well, there's quite a lot of, I've seen a lot of the push for the North Coast 500 and things like that. And again, if you're a business on that route, then you're going to be quite happy with everybody doing that push for it. Are there any questions around the room? If you just either want to unmute yourself or raise your hand.
This of course, is the age of the camper van.
Mm-hmm.
You can see that particularly in the Island Sky and Lewis and Harris and everything. Until coronavirus came along, rather a lot of camper vans. Not terribly popular with the local businesses because they tend to, gosh, I hope there aren't too many camper van owners here, but they tend to stock up at Tesco and Sainsbury before they leave, and they come across to the islands and not spend very much money and leave lots of litter, hopefully in bins, and then go away again. They don't patronise the local businesses to the extent that some of the local businesses feel they would like them to. And the bed and breakfast people as well. Of course, if you're coming in a camper van, you're bringing your own accommodation.
Yeah.
But also for the space they take up on the ferries.
Aye, it's all this thing you didn't even think about, but yeah, there is.
So there's always these competing interests, but we quite like the camper vans because at least people are coming and they're spending some money in the local economy, particularly on Harris Tweed and the like.
Mm-hmm. And again, it's I think it's just been able to adapt and change the ever-changing environment. Well,
this is it. I mean, I was talking to somebody in Stornoway a couple of years ago who said that 80% of his business comes over the internet. Because if you're wanting to buy genuine Hebridean things, Hebridean jewellery, Harris Tweed, the Hebridean pottery, things like that, do you want to buy it from Amazon? If you're in America, or Australia, or Canada, New Zealand, South Africa, do you want to buy it from Amazon, or do you want to go into the website Hebridean business, have it sent from the Isle of Lewis? That's what you want to do. And so their Hebridean has become as powerful a marketing name as Trossachs was in the 19th century.
It's really interesting because there's all that thing, say Champagne's maybe an example of it, and it's very much the regional thing that was trying to sell there. So it's interesting how business and economy comes in and affects all the things.
That's right. And for small businesses nowadays, I think the lessons of history of this one and the previous one that I did, the lesson of history is really to keep an eye on how the market's developing and to move in the right direction. Sometimes that means coming out of the business altogether. Very bold decisions were made by the likes of C&A and John Mingus. John Mingus sold off all their shops to W.H. Smith's and concentrated on their airside business. C&A decided to withdraw from the British market altogether because they didn't feel that they could compete with Primark and Matalan and the like to concentrate on continental Europe. Some Littlewoods as well, they pulled out the retail business to concentrate on their internet business. Initially their mail order and then their internet business. Sometimes very bold decisions have to be made, but even the smallest business has to kind of have a look at the way the market's developing. And if you're in Stornoway and you're running a traditional clothes shop, it's not a good time to be running a traditional clothes shop. It's a great time to be out there with a Hebridean business that you can promote on the internet.
That whole providence around it.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely. So I don't know, is there any other question? I don't think there has been many questions, because me and you ramble on there mainly, David.
That's fine. That's fine.
Excellent. So, I think we'll leave it there then.
Thank you, David.
Okay, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Right, thanks very much. Thanks for coming. Thanks for coming, everyone. Bye then.
Thank you, David. Take care.
And you.